Institute, the University of Western Cape, the Swiss Embassy, the Department of Cooperative Governance, and the Independent Electoral Commission, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for attending. As you know, our local government elections is next week, and we are launching the revised election guide for councillors, hence this important webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Professor Jaap de Visser, the head of the Dullah Omar Institute, to commence. Professor de Visser.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pillay. Thanks so much for welcoming us and for the role that you have played in putting all of this together already. So welcome everyone. My name is Jaap de Visser. I'm the director of the Dullah Omar Institute, and it's my honor to welcome you to this webinar about the local government elections of next week, 7 days to go before the election. So these are exciting times, turbulent times, and I think it's all the more befitting that we take a moment to reflect on some of the key issues in the elections that are upon us. So thanks everyone for joining. A specific word of thanks to all our partners. Mr. Pillay mentioned all of them: the IEC, Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and of course the Swiss Embassy. We are very grateful for your partnership and for your support for this initiative. So let me just open with a few remarks to get the juices flowing and to get us into the debate on the local government elections, with asking the questions, what are these elections about? What is going to be the key theme that's going to emerge from these elections? And before I go into that, I think it's good to pause for a moment and sort of reiterate the crucial role that the Independent Electoral Commission is playing in these elections. It goes without saying that they are absolutely essential and have been in the run-up to these elections, and will be in the weeks to come, with delivering the elections, dealing with the results, and undoubtedly many of complexities that will come their way. A lot has been said about the IEC. It has been a difficult run-up. The impact of COVID-19, of course, has been dramatic, and almost sort of, got us to postpone the elections. There was a long run-up with the Moseneke report, the Constitutional Court case. Also a lot of criticism on the IEC, I think very often unwarranted. And I think it's good to sort of place on record that the IEC has delivered free and fair elections since 1994, and that we have full confidence in the role of the IEC and its capabilities to pull it off. Of course, the run-up was not flawless, but I think we can count on the IEC to discharge its role with integrity and independence. So what are these elections about? The one thing that I have been saying to anyone who wants to hear is that I really hope that these elections will be about local performance, that these are local elections, that they are not national elections hidden in a local jacket, but that they are truly voters go to the polls to cast their ballot based on the question, how did my municipality perform? Did it deliver on its promises? Did the councillors in this municipality and the political parties that they represented, did they deliver on the promises that they made? Did they steal the money, or did they deliver services with efficiency and with equity? And I hope that those are the questions that will guide the voters, and less so the question of to which political party have I particular mythical feelings, or which other political party do I hate with a passion. It should not be about those questions. It should really be about how did my municipality perform. I also think it should be about restoring good governance, because it's no secret that in many of our municipalities, governance is bad or has even collapsed. Not in all municipalities. I'm always quick to say that we shouldn't condemn all of the 257 municipalities, but there are too many that are in governance crisis. I have just finished, together with my co-author, Professor Nico Steitler, who will speak towards the end of the seminar, a review of the case law, which we do for our book, Local Government Law, South Africa. So then you troll through 2 years of case law. And I had the misfortune, I guess, of going through the case law on governance in local government. And the picture is indeed grim. If what the courts have had to deal with is anything to go by, there are really many municipalities that are municipal councils that are truly misbehaving. And it comes through in the courts, with the courts also sometimes sounding warning signs of despair, asking the question, why are these cases coming to us? Why are these cases coming to us of a political party in the chamber of the council accosting the speaker and physically violating him and removing him from the podium? What is that about? Why is this case coming to us of a municipality that has managed to appoint 2 municipal speakers and 2 municipal managers and 2 mayors in 2 separate meetings? And now the court has to figure out who is who. So these are signs of governance collapse. And I really hope that these elections will restore good governance in those municipalities plagued by those very serious problems. I also hope it will put the spotlight on some of the more systemic issues in local government, such as the fact that local government in many respects is systemically underfunded. That, for example, the dramatic changes in the way we consume and generate electricity has a big impact on how municipalities fund themselves and their ability to cross-subsidize services with the surplus that they make of the sale of electricity. One of the many questions that are systemic. And also how local government is increasingly expected to step in where national government fails or where poverty is rife, and municipalities are supposed to foot the bill of ever increasing unemployment and social distress, and municipalities are not funded in a way that makes that easy, and that's an understatement. There's a need to revisit the fiscal framework for local government, and local government at the bottom of the food chain in intergovernmental relations, always at the mercy of ever-changing national, provincial initiatives, laws, policies that sometimes confuse and befuddle what happens at local government rather than enhance it. And one hopes that the district development model that the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs is piloting, that will bring more coherence to government delivery at local level. So those are just some of the systemic issues that I hope will be major questions in the election, and also in the discussion and the debates that we're having around these elections, because that's, I think, also the nice thing about these elections, that suddenly local government is in the spotlight, and people really take notice of what's happening at municipal level, and one hopes that leads to improvement. So of course, the big electoral question is, will it be the election of big change? Will it be the election of sweeping changes through all our municipalities with dramatic shifts in power across the councils? And I'm never good at predicting electoral outcomes, and that's not my forte. There are people who do that much better than I can. But I suppose one of the points to be made is that in local elections, everybody will win and everybody will lose. And that for me is the beauty of decentralization, of having many sites of democratic contestation. Political parties will win some and they will lose some. They will win power in one municipality and they will lose power in another. So in that sense, local elections and decentralized democracy diffuses some of the polarization that we're seeing in South Africa, because not everything is about that one central government office or that one site of power in Pretoria. This is about 257 sites of political power and everybody will win and everybody will also lose. And I think that's the beauty of decentralized democracy. But maybe there is something to be said about the emergence of new parties and new movements. Will they make a change? We have seen a number of new parties on the block, local parties, new national parties, and of course the issue of coalitions. Many people speak about this is going to be an election it's going to produce more hung councils than before and more coalition needed than before. That all remains to be seen. It all depends on the electoral outcome. But there is, I think, an important debate to be had on how we manage coalitions. Coalitions are not new. We have had coalitions actually ever since 2000. There's always been municipalities with councils where there was no outright majority. And in fact, the need for coalitions is sort of baked into our electoral system. It is almost an inevitable result of the fact that we have proportional representation in our local government system. So it's something that will remain with us. Until now, the experience with coalitions probably has been mostly bad, mostly unstable coalitions that haven't been able to run stable and efficient governments. And I think it's interesting and important to talk about what we can do to improve stability in coalitions. And of course, we look forward to the input from Ms. Bierkes on that aspect. One sort of parting shot I want to give there on that topic is, for me, we need to move towards more mature and experienced leadership around coalitions, along the principle of don't do unto others what you don't want them to do unto you. Because in one election, you may be the kingmaker, but when the tables turn, you are on the other side of the fence and you have to maybe engage in coalition negotiations from a completely different perspective. And we need to move towards a more principled approach to coalition formation and coalition management. But we look forward to the discussion on that. But before that, we of course first need to have elections. And I was very thrilled to be able to update the manual that we produced on local government elections in 2016, together with my co-author, Professor Nico Steitler. So we updated all the details that had changed in the way elections ought to be run. So what we're launching today is a very detailed guide with an explanation of the system of elections, the preparation for elections, what happens on voting day, the counting, the declaration of results, the calculation of seats with some formulas, examples of formulas in the manual, and also importantly, how vacancies are filled and what the laws and procedures are for filling vacancies in between elections, with by-elections and councillors resigning, etc. Because elections is an ongoing process, certainly in local government, where in fact elections never stop, and the representatives from the IEC can attest to that. And I'm very grateful to Mr. Granville Abrams, who will speak after me, after we hear from the Embassy of Switzerland, was kind enough to also look through the manual and give it a thumbs up, so that we were not off the mark, and that our numbers made sense, and that what we were doing was a useful exercise indeed. So thanks very much to the IEC and all the other partners for making this possible. And I look forward to the rest of the discussions. Let me hand back over to the chair, Mr. Pillay, or Dr. Johnstone, if she's made it into the meeting. And thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Professor Diffesser. I'd like to now welcome Ms. Shami Fanny, the Deputy Head of the Diplomatic Division of the Embassy of Switzerland in South Africa. And Ms. Fanny, if I might request, I've received your bio, which was very interesting. And I was also privy to you sharing your background and your history on the political route, and your dad being a mayor. So if you don't mind, I'm going to welcome you and let you share with the guests your background. And again, thanking you for making this event possible. Over to you, Ms. Fanny.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pillay. Yes, indeed, as you say, it's been a while that I've been involved in politics. But before I give you a little bit a few ideas about my background, let me start by thank you all of you very dearly for taking me the opportunity to address the crowd today with a few words. Our embassy is very happy to collaborate with all of you on this webinar, of course, but especially on the creation, the updates of the guide for the elections. Yes, I hope that all the people present today in the webinar had, of course, a look at this guide. It is a tool. It provides actually a great framework for election. It was also a great framework for myself, I must say, because I don't come from South Africa, and I must say that the electoral process on local level was quite challenging to grasp and to understand for me, being new in the country. So I got to learn a lot from this guide. As Mr. Pillay was saying before, yes, I've been active in Switzerland, my country of origin, on local level actually of politics. Mr. Pillay just said it. Actually, my dad was a mayor of the small town from where I come from. And interestingly enough, he was not he was not a party member. In Switzerland, we have actually 50% of the locally elected politicians are not affiliated to a party. So I think it gives you a little bit of an idea of what you need to strive for, what are your priorities, and what is your accountability that you have towards actually the people that elect you, because they did not elect you for the party, they elected you because you actually made promises that you are then supposed to help. So I could experience it myself, being at home, people coming to our place, ringing the bell, asking, when are you going to fill in the potholes in the village main road, or when are you going to bring finally public transportation to the main town? This was also part of my everyday life for a long time, and I think it really shaped my political sense and also my political understanding of what are local elections, what is accountability, and what is also responsibility of the people elected, and also of the people that elect that are taking part in the elections. But to come back to this guide, I think, well, if you would like to understand exactly what are the elections, who you are going to vote for, who you want to elect, who you would like to delegate your power to, it is of course very important, first of all, to understand the process in which you are taking part of, and that's why actually Switzerland took a great interest in pushing forward the update of this guide and of this great idea. We think it's actually just not a guide. It's just not a booklet or a manual. It has a much deeper purpose. It raises awareness about the rights, about the democratic rights of the population, and it makes really sure that all the citizens are informed about their rights and the conditions required to vote. But we definitely think that such a guide, such a project plays a very strong role in free, fair, peaceful, responsible elections. And in that sense, here we meet also the priorities of the Swiss embassy and of Switzerland as a whole. It is actually part of the constitution of Switzerland to ensure, to promote a peaceful living together all around the world. And we are very deeply convinced that one way to achieve this, to achieve this very idealistic role is to strengthen democratic process and through a peaceful and legitimate sharing of power. So today we are really not here as Switzerland to speak about the parties, to speak ourselves about the issues. We are we are very keen to listen to all of that. We are not here to discuss the arguments of the candidates, but we are here to speak about the framework in which all of this is happening. We all know, of course, that elections are a pivotal moment in a democracy, in any kind of democracy. Actually, it is a national endeavor that should be really there to encourage democratic debates. It should be there to offer choices to citizens, to boost the sense of common interest and democratic culture. But we also know, of course, that it is a moment also of increased tensions, of possibly of confrontation rather than dialogue, a moment also of division more than unification, and misinformation, unfortunately, also rather than facts, if not speaking about possible violence. So we think that the creation of and the diffusion of such a guide, such a manual is a little step towards a strengthened democratic process, a little step to build trust. But in the end, it is also our shared responsibility, our shared social responsibility to create this conducive environment for peaceful elections and to ensure a broad participation during the election in these, before, in these 6 days ahead of us, during the election, and also very importantly after. And this will be my main message today, and I will finish with that. Because I had a look at the numbers, actually, how many people are candidates, how many seats are available. There are currently something like 95,000 candidates for the local election this year in South Africa, for a total of only 10,500 seats. So it means that after the election, of course, South Africa will deal with a few newly elected politicians that will be probably very happy for being elected. But, and this is also more challenging, it will have to deal with 85,000 non-elected people. My colleague just before me was saying that there are no winners and no losers in local elections. This is true, but still it has an impact, I think, on also on the way you lose or the way you win an election. It has an impact on what is going to be your behavior after the elections, right? And in that sense, I think we should definitely see this whole process as a sport competition. In a sport, there are winners in the end, of course, but the winners, they can only be there because there are opponents to challenge them, and because these opponents actually also put their energy and the strength in participation. And this is going to be like my last words for today. I definitely think that we should actually embrace the challengers as well. We should not forget them after the elections. We should not exclude them, as they are the ones who are also the engine of democracy, and in the end, they all push us, all of us, to make better choice. So with these fundamentals to keep in mind, I would like to thank you, all of you, one more time, and I wish to all of us a fruitful discussion today.
Thank you so very much, Fanny. I quickly would like to apologize. Unfortunately, I was experiencing connection problems, so I joined you late. But fortunately, I am here right now, and I must say I enjoyed the introductions by Prof. Diffeser and by Ms. Fanny Chani. And I'm excited to announce that next we would be listening to Mr. Granville Abrams. I'd like to give an introduction to Mr. Abrams. He's one of a few remaining officials that joined the Electoral Commission of South Africa in its infancy. With 23 years of experience in managing all aspects of elections, Granville is currently a senior executive responsible for electoral matters, which include, amongst others, the driving of the legislative amendments, the registration and liaison of political parties and candidates, managing elections and the filling of councillor vacancies, maintaining the national common voters roll, as well as managing electoral conflict. So also he's a graduate of the University of the Western Cape in 1986 and has since then attended executive studies at UCT, UP, Stellenbosch, as well as Gibbs. So internationally, he has also made a footprint for himself, which includes being a representative in the United Nations, in managing the elections in the Grand Comoros, as well as the African Union as an observer in Nigeria, and the International IDEA in Tunisia, training on elections, results, and transmissions. So with that broad experience, I am happy to hand over to you, Granville, and for you to take us through the issues of the 21 local government elections, the legal framework, and what to expect and what has changed. Thank you. Over to you, Granville.
Thank you very much, Shyam, and thanks to also to Professor De Visser and Steytler for the invitation. Allow me to, first of all, to thank you, Professor De Visser, for those kind words. It's not many people nowadays that comes to the defense of the Electoral Commission. We are ever take whatever criticism there is, we take that on the chin. Administering elections, it's never an easy task, and it's even more difficult if the stakes are high, and within the South African context, each and every election that goes by, they are just higher. We are ever encouraged at all times, whoever is aggrieved and who has a different view from us, you know, to take their disputes, either have them resolved within the framework or as provided for in the courts, because that is what mature democracies do. And we encourage that, and we also abide by whatever the courts have decided. In the past few years, we've won some, we've lost some, but there will always be winners and losers. The same in the elections. Of the 95,325 political parties, there are going to be some winners and some losers. However, let's not forget the referee or the umpire, and that is basically where the IEC stands. We get it from both sides, from those who win and from those who lose. Ideally, if we really have to satisfy everybody, then everybody would get a seat, but that is limited. So here we are on the eve of an election, I think, which Professor De Visser started out by saying it's very difficult, there are lots of challenges. I would prefer rather just to refer to it as different, because we haven't experienced the type of challenges that we have done for this year. We would normally deliver an election in an election timetable of about 82 days. We are now doing that within 42. Not only that, we had to basically do candidate nomination, voter registration, and plan for this election all at the same time, as well as do our training and the printing of ballot papers within a very, very constricted time. The big challenge is that when we do get it right in a time like this, is that we unfortunately raise the bar, and probably next time around somebody's going to expect us to do it within 20 days. But anyway, that's just tongue in cheek. Obviously the election, or once the results is announced, it signals the beginning of a new term, but it also signals, the start of a whole new set of challenges for the duration of that term. If I reflect back, and not that I normally want to use this term, but for the purpose of this platform, I think that is what we are using. In 2016, we had 20 hung councils. We prefer to refer to them as councils where there's no outright majority. In 2011, we actually had a little bit more. We had about 23. But the big difference or significance in 2016 was that 4 of them were metros, which is obviously where the big contest and the big prize is. Of the 20 hung councils, as a result of the indecisiveness in terms of coming to decision-making, key decisions in that municipalities, we had about 4 of those municipalities were actually dissolved, which means we had to have an election from scratch, re-electing all of the councils, key among them being Nutu, Abakulusi, and Metsi Maholo. The dissolution in Tshwane was overturned in the court, but not before it, it led to a very long stalemate in terms of having council actually being effective there. Also important to note is that the Johannesburg coalition did not last, and there was also a change or a handover of power somewhere in the middle or in between. Now, these are some of the challenges that is in the public domain and that we're all aware of. However, there are other challenges that the IEC has to deal with on a daily basis that you're never going to hear about. And that is what I'm going to share with you today. First of all, litigation when it comes to the appointment or the removal of councils, that's the order of the day. And it basically has the following nature, specifically within parties that are not as established. I cannot use the term smaller parties because I respect obviously the position of all parties, but specifically parties that have that are more newly established. We are bound to find leadership disputes there. And what this arises in is that you find one person that regards himself as the leader, either firing other councillors or saying that they are no longer members of that party, or one leader decides to terminate the membership of another. And these end up in long court battles. If I could just mention a case in point, the PAC has now been involved in its leadership dispute, probably now going through 3 elections. And the only time when they are basically either able to resolve it or to get a court order giving us clarity is on the eve of the election. And this is what happened in this election as well. Then, and I'm sure that we're going to find quite a number of them now as well, where parties will do a cleanup. There's been a lot of candidates who may have spread their bets. And by that, I mean that they stood as candidates either for more than one party or as an independent and as a candidate. The legislation states that you lose your membership of that council if you are now a member of a different party than the one whose ticket you came on in that election. In this election, the election of local council reps to district council is probably something that not a lot of the public is really aware of or all that interested. But the councillors on the district council, they directly proportionally elected 40% on the ballot. The 60% based on predetermined numbers comes from the councillors of the local municipalities in that district. And the way that election happens is that at the first council meeting, there is nominations and there's a vote, and depending on the amount of votes and the number of seats available, that would then allocate the seats. But what happens at these elections, as part of your coalition, and I put coalition in quotes, of your coalition agreements, you find that parties may draw up a combined list for representation onto the district council as part of their trading. However, when things go sour, then they may not adhere to those arrangements. And the important thing as the Electoral Commission is that the list has an owner. And just because you were part of an agreement with another party does not automatically entitle you to fill a seat on that list if you were on a joint party list. The owner of the list remains the nominee. And the clever thing that bigger parties do is that they always ensure that they are the nominee and the smaller party gets the short end of the stick, which means that they can easily get rid of them once they no longer have a need for them. Then, obviously, if there is, and as we have seen now already, in councils without an outright majority, we normally end up with deadlocks. And it's just a matter of time between that deadlock leads to a dissolution as a result of them not being able to make key decisions, such as the passing the vote on the budget. The next thing you have is the municipality is placed under administration and dissolved. There's for this election, and this is out in the public. We also have a party who has said that they will do investigations into their nomination process, as they have done, I think it was 2016. And as a result of that, there was a lot of vacancies that were declared after that election to fix the issues within the party as far as nominations is concerned. Then another issue that normally also ends up in litigation is where we have municipal managers who do not fulfill their legislative duty, but it's probably more administrative, by simply just having to inform the Electoral Commission or the Chief Electoral Officer, rather, of a vacancy. As a result of the fact that they're being held hostage, by the politics within that municipality. Obviously, by elections, it's high stakes. Or the replacement of councillors, it's high stakes in some municipalities where this could lead to a power shift during a term. And we've seen 2 or 3 cases of that. Now, our role is to administer the elections. And once councils have been constituted, then our role as far as local council is concerned is basically to fill the vacancies. Now, in terms of the Municipal Structures Act, which is the guiding legislation in this regard, only the Chief Electoral Officer and nobody else, and I'm emphasizing that because there are some office bearers and even within political parties who may be of the opinion that they also have the authority. Only the Chief Electoral Officer has the competency within our legislative framework to appoint a councillor. Nobody else can appoint a councillor. One exception may be is where, in terms of a court order, we are ordered, but then once again, it is the Chief Electoral Officer who has to execute that court order. That court order cannot be executed by any other official. People who definitely can't, and I need to emphasize this, it is obvious, but people who definitely cannot appoint or declare a councillor elected is the party leader. His role is limited to informing us that there's a vacancy with a valid reason. And he may also amend the party list, meaning that he or she may nominate a new candidate. Some speakers are of the opinion that they have the powers. They definitely do not. There's absolutely no role within the legislation for the speaker. The only role within the council is the municipal manager, who we regard as the accounting officer, and who would then have to take these steps to inform the Electoral Commission. We also have, in some cases, an MEC or two who may decide that he also has the power to appoint. The role of the MEC is limited in the amendment, the same as the municipal manager, to inform us, and may also take such steps as necessary to have a councillor removed in terms of the code of conduct. But MECs cannot appoint councillors. I think I want to now focus on what has changed in the amendments that were passed this year and that will be coming into effect on the 1st of November. The reason for the delay in the amendment coming into effect is that in the Act, there are also some issues relating to demarcation, which my colleague from COGTA may possibly deal with. So to ensure that those demarcation issues do not come in before the term and therefore impact on the elections, they have been delayed until the 1st of November. But effectively, what this amendment deals with is some of the administrative challenges that we've had. It's been a very, very long process. I can remember that we had very optimistically tried to have this in place for the 2016 election. And I think we probably started at about late in 2014, 2015. But it's been delayed for a number of reasons, and possibly the last 3 years because of the fact that COGTA also brought in some provisions that's got to do more with governance issues. So that added to the list, and obviously they all then went in together. So in terms of the amendments, the key thing in this election, and the parties may not have sunk through to parties yet. I'm briefing the National Political Party Liaison Committee tomorrow, and I think at the time when I briefed them, which was about 1.5 years or 2 ago, when this the bill was tabled, they didn't take it too seriously, but we're now at the business end of things. Previously, the legislation provided that a party could amend its list at any time without any qualification. And the problem that we had with that is that the Chief Electoral Officer has a role to fulfill in certifying a candidate list. This is the 95,000 that Mr. Chami mentioned earlier. And if parties are allowed to just change them at any time, then and therefore offering no protection for the certified list, it would first of all be possible for a party to have a totally different list when it comes to the allocation of seats than the one that was exposed to the public, that one would assume in a normal democracy would inform their choices. Secondly, we also found, and this is where the point that I'm coming to now, is that parties would have a list, but when they see how many seats they won, and also when it comes to the horse trading, then they want to make all sorts of adjustments and amendments before council has even had its first meeting. And what this has done, it created a nightmare for us in terms of administering and publishing the list, because the urgency of that was that parties could only, at least councils can only constitute if the list of councillors are published. So that's the reason for that. So what's going to happen in this election now is once the results and the seats are announced, you're going to find there's going to be a mad scurry. Everybody's going to be disappointed. And the candidates that you have, in the order that you have, they're going to have to take up the seats. Because the first opportunity to change or amend your list, and by that time councillors are already appointed, will be after the first council meeting. And then the only way to affect any changes would obviously be for the municipal manager to declare a vacancy. So that's gonna have an interesting, dynamic, and I hope to see what that's going to bring about. Then the next thing is that also been brought in, that's of relevance now, is that to deal with the issue of leadership disputes is that only an authorized representative, as defined in the Municipal Electoral Act, will be able to inform the municipal manager of a vacancy. So you don't have, every Dick, Tom, and Tabo coming and saying, this is now a change that we want to bring about. Very key is the introduction of a cooling off period for councillors who have been removed in terms of the code of conduct. There was one matter that the MEC for the Western Cape took to court because it differed with our view, even though we totally agreed with the sentiment that he had removed a councillor, and the next day the councillor, who was also the leader of the party, he just put himself at the top of the list again. And the chief electoral officer's sole responsibility in this is to elect the person at the top of the list, and he has no discretion other than that. But this was introduced specifically in the light of that, but obviously the IEC had no discretion in that. I think the key thing, just to end off with, is it's also going to impact on the filling of vacancies, councillor vacancies, is a matter of Mr. Mphahlele. He went to court and he received a court audit in his favor in this Mphahlele judgment. Effectively, what had happened there is that he was at the top of a list. The guideline or the schedule refers to certain timelines. It says if there's a vacancy, then the party has 21 days within which to amend the list. And after that 21 days has passed, or if it has amended those lists, then within 14 days of that date, then the chief electoral officer must elect the person at the top of the list. Because of the dynamics and the local politics, the municipal manager held back on this. And by the time he had given it to the IEC, 21 days had already passed. And unbeknown to the IEC of this fact, or rather our interpretation of that stage was that since we received it late and that was beyond our control, we started counting from the day that we had received it, even though we disposed of the matter immediately. We never knew about the vacancy prior to that. Mr. Mphahlele politely went to court, and the court said that time has passed. We have no discretion in this matter. The municipal manager delayed this matter, and we cannot add any time to that. And we had to then abide by the court's order to reappoint Mr. Mphahlele. I raise this because this happens quite a lot, in that parties hold us back, and municipal managers also hold them back. And in that time lapses, and it then puts us in a position whereby we have to do, or we have to abide to the letter of the law. And basically that means just electing the person who is at the top of the list. There was another judgment, the case just, the name of the case just, what's the name's me at this stage, but it was also, and this is what municipal managers are going to have to be very wary of, is to say that when they play this game, that the court actually made a case that municipal managers may actually begin to be held liable in their personal capacity, because this is not conduct becoming of the legislation, whereby they have to have the discretion to hold back on these things. They've got a simple responsibility just to inform the Electoral Commission of this. We have then also amended the legislation to say that the municipal manager must henceforth inform both the Chief Electoral Officer and the MEC, so that at least there's some accountability, because it appears municipal managers have no accountability to the Chief Electoral Officer, but however to the political head in the province, that there will be some accountability as far as that is concerned. So we look forward, as with all the other elections, but I think this one's probably going to be more interesting if we are led to believe by what is predicted, and probably some of it will come to the fore in this discussion, because the more dynamics we have in municipalities, the more that specific municipality becomes dynamic and faces new challenges, and we hope to see how those challenges are being addressed. Ultimately, our responsibility is limited to appointing councillors, to administering the election, but I'm sure that we all would argue for stable councils to ensure that the key objective of local government, being that of service delivery, is achieved. Thank you very much once again. I submit at this point and then back to you, to the convener. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Granville, for sharing with us the dynamics, the trends, and also what to expect from the laws, the legal implications. I saw a lot of questions coming in as you were speaking, but I want people to just hold their questions for the Q&A session, which will be facilitated by my colleague, Kugan Pillay. Right now, we're going to move on to Mr. Thabo Manyoni, who doesn't need any introduction, but I will take the opportunity to read out the impressive experience that Mr. Manyoni brings to the table. Mr. Manyoni is a local government practitioner with extensive senior level executive management experience, including advanced administrative and corporate governance skills across a range of different sizes in municipalities. He has a proven and well-developed understanding of local government functions, both in South Africa and in international settings. Moreover, his exposure and experience in leading local governments in the SADC countries has enabled him to build a strong reputation for delivering results through collaboration amongst diverse teams. He has experience in managing and operating at international settings and handling of international relations. The list goes on, and if I can just also mention a few of the positions that Mr. Manyoni has held, which includes being a municipal manager at Maluti, Mafokeng municipality, and then being a city manager at Mangaung municipality, as well as being the MEC for police, roads and transports, and also being the chairperson of SALGA and the president of the United Cities and Local Governments in SADC. So, Mr. Manyoni, I could go on until the break of dawn with your experience. What I would like for you to share with us, given your vast experience, is what, in your view, do you think local governments can do to build better communities? Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Mayor Johnston. When you were talking, I was busy blushing, and I thought, now I must meet all this in terms of how you raise the bar. Let me also take the opportunity to thank Mr. Pillay, Prof, my colleague from IEC, Ntate Abrams, and of course, my colleague from COGTA, and all the participants. Thanks very much. Let me first say that in South Africa, the concept of better communities is inherent in our South African Constitution, as highlighted in the preamble of our Constitution. I would like to quote. The preamble says, "We, the people of South Africa, believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity." It goes on to say, "We therefore, through our freely elected representatives," in this case, I will refer to local government, "adopt this constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to, one, heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights." It goes on to say, with, of course, the intention to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. So already you can hear from that, improving the quality of life, and of course, the issue of using or through our representatives, making sure that what is in the Constitution basically applies. And the measure for this is basically in our document, which is chapter 2 of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. I would like also to quote there, the Bill of Rights in South Africa says, "This Bill of Rights is a cornerstone of democracy in South Africa. It enshrines the rights of all people in our country and affirms the democratic values of human dignity." Human dignity also then becomes key in this regard, equality and freedom. If you go through the Bill of Rights chapter, you will hear that it says on property, no one may be deprived of property except in terms of the law of general application. Everybody has to have property in the country. On housing, it goes on to say, everyone has the right to have access to adequate housing. On healthcare, food, water, and social security, it goes on to say, everyone has the right to access to healthcare services, including reproductive healthcare, sufficient food and water, and also social security, including, if they are unable to support themselves and their dependents, appropriate social assistance. Now, given all those, we can then basically say, yes, even here in South Africa, government has expanded access to housing, we know. People have been getting electricity in some cases, most of the cases, of course. And also they've been getting free basic water services. But to provide all those, in terms of what I've read in the preamble, that is not enough. And I think we need to note a few issues which I would call the 4 basic principles for better communities. One is the quality of service that the local government has to provide. In other words, you don't just have to comply with the Constitution, provide the necessary housing, provide electricity, provide water. The quality of that water is what makes better communities. The quality of roads is what will make better communities. In other words, potholeless roads, decent sanitation, adequate water, undisturbed energy provision like electricity. The quality becomes a key as part of the principles for building better communities by local government. The second principle will be participatory democracy. And I think also that is quite important in the sense that communities, organized stakeholders, in other words, non-governmental organizations, developmental organizations, families, individuals, also need to have a voice on how their villages, towns, cities, metros, of course, are governed and have to be developed. This is also linked to responsive and accessible local government. For us to say, yes, we are building better communities, not only communities. The third principle will be regular and frequent monitoring and evaluation. I would prefer this, of course, to be done through citizen surveys so that local government doesn't only evaluate itself internally, but communities themselves give a voice on how they view the performance of local government. But the most important key for me, Mayor Johnston, in all this, it's the people behind the systems that we have put and so on. Let's quote from a poem by D.K. Chukwumerije, who says, "Fix the politics, for you cannot drive faster than the person driving you. No matter your wealth, education, and achievement, you are subject to the mentality of those in government." Leadership at local government becomes quite key if you are going to provide or build better communities. You can't talk about better communities without talking about better quality, visionary leadership. In this regard, I'm talking about ethical leadership, compassionate leaders, whether they are bureaucrats or not, and of course, visionary. Because this builds trust. If there is trust deficit, you can't then have better communities in the country. And I think for us in South Africa, it is not an option, as I indicated from the Constitution, but it is mandatory because this is enshrined in the Constitution. It is mandatory for local government to build better communities, not just to build communities. And the 4 principles that I outlined of quality service, participatory democracy, frequent evaluation by citizens, and of course, visionary leadership becomes quite key for me in this regard. That is my take. I can see my 10 minutes now on the dot. Thank you very much, man, and thanks for the play.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moniani. Just to iterate, I think succinctly categorize the issues of the principles, also the quality and the leadership at the local government level, which needs to be visionary and ethical. And as we know, corruption is a very big problem when it comes to leadership in all spheres of government, but as well as local government particularly. So I thank you for that presentation. And we move from that presentation to the question of how do we hold newly elected councillors accountable? And to address that question, we have our colleague, Mr. Siyanda Mdletshe. He has lots of experience to delve into this issue and to share with us his insights. He has previously been he's currently a manager with the Municipal Institutional Establishment in the Department of Cooperative Governance, where he is responsible for, amongst other things, providing advice on electoral-related matters, as well as supporting the Inter-Ministerial Committee on Elections in preparation for the forthcoming municipal elections. Previously, in his earlier life, Mr. Mdletshe was also a municipal manager of Utukele District Municipality in KwaZulu-Natal Province. He holds a master's degree in development studies from the University of the Free State. And against that backdrop, Sianda, I hand the floor over to you to share with us your insights and your views on how we can hold elected councillors accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address this exciting topic about how to hold newly elected councillors accountable. In an effort to ensure that governance is enhanced and that accountability in municipal councils is improved, the department, in partnership with stakeholders, proposed interventions in the Local Government Municipal Structures Amendment Bill. The bill was assented to by the President on 26 May 2021 and published in the Government Gazette as Act Number 3 of 2021 on 1 June 2021. The Amendment Act will come to operation, as my colleague said, on 1 November 2021, which will coincide with the elections of the new local representatives. These interventions, amongst others, include the empowering the municipal council speaker with additional functions to ensure that the council effectively fulfills its various responsibilities. It also comes up with the establishment of the municipal public account committees, similar to SCOPA from the national sphere, and also beefing up the code of conduct for councillors, which has now been migrated from the Municipal Systems Act and included in the Municipal Structures Act. It can be argued that one of the causes of the municipal governance collapse is an unclear delineation of roles amongst office bearers in the municipal space. The conflict between the executive mayors and speakers regarding the distinction of roles and functions, which promotes checks and balances, undermines accountability in municipal councils. Now the speaker is entrusted with additional functions in terms of the amendment to promote accountability. The amendment now stipulates that the speaker of a municipality must ensure that the legislative authority of the municipality functions effectively. The speaker is responsible for the effective oversight over the executive authority of the municipality. Speaker must ensure the effectiveness of the committees of the municipal council established in terms of Section 79. Is also responsible for the ethics and accountability of the municipal council and must ensure the effectiveness and functionality of ward committees and the public participation process. If we look into all these new additional functions, they are all clear that the emphasis as included now in the Amendment Act is to make sure that the municipal councils are accountable and also to make sure that the communities in the wards, now the speaker is now responsible fully to make sure that there's public participation and also that the ward committees are established. And the municipal speaker is really now required that they must establish ward committees within 120 days after the local government elections. It shows the emphasis of why we should now have the municipal councils accountable, that those institutions should be in place. Another issue that is being addressed is coming out from the argument that underfunding is only one side of the coin on explaining the local government challenge on service delivery. The other coin is whether poor service delivery is not as a result of ineffective and inefficient unitization of available resources. Due to repeated calls over a long period of time for a need of a legislation to provide for an oversight to be conducted in the municipal council, a new provision which provides for the establishment of the Municipal Public Accounts Committee has now been introduced in the Amendment Act. What is important here is that municipal office bearers, the speakers, the mayors, the executive mayors, the officials of the council, as well as the councillors and executive committees, are not allowed to be part of the Municipal Public Accounts Committee. The Municipal Council must determine the functions of the MPAC, which is the Municipal Public Accounts Committee, which must include, which now in the Act, a review of the Auditor General's report and comments from the Management Committee and the Audit Committee and make recommendations to the Municipal Council. They must also have a review on the internal audit reports together with comments from the Management Committee and the Audit Committee and make recommendations to the Municipal Council. And the MPAC must do or initiate and develop the oversight report on annual reports contemplated in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act. The MPAC must attend to and make recommendations to the Municipal Council on any matter referred to it by the Municipal Council. It can be an executive committee as well, a committee of the council, a member of the MPAC, a councillor, and the municipal manager. And on its own initiative, now the MPACs are empowered, subject to the direction of the Municipal Council, to investigate and report to the Municipal Council on any matter affecting the municipality. What is mostly important here in this legislation is that the Municipal Public Accounts Committee reports must be submitted to the Speaker, who must table such reports, and I emphasize, in the next meeting of the Municipal Council. This will ensure that accountability is not undermined by instances where the MPAC reports do not reach the Council for appropriate action. The other issue that is being addressed in the Amendment Act in terms of accountability is about the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct for councillors spells out clearly the do's and don'ts as a councillor. Further on, the code addresses the processes to be followed in the case of a breach. The Code of Conduct for councillors, as I've said, has been now migrated from the Municipal Systems Act and included in the Structures Act, as it was considered a deemed fit within the greater scheme of the provisions of the Principal Act. While the Code of Conduct remains likely intact, the new changes have been made to enhance accountability. A new provision has been included in the code to provide for instances where a speaker is the alleged perpetrator, or if the speaker refuses to authorize an investigation, then the council must establish a special committee to investigate and make a finding on any alleged breach of the code. Another provision that has been included in the code required the speaker to inform the MEC within 14 days of the finding and sanction decided on by the council pursuant to any investigation on the breach of the code. So with these inclusions, it's clear that there won't be any cover-ups now, because the MEC, who is not part of the council, is now brought in this instance to oversee what's happening within the municipal space. Without really taking a lot of time, I want to also touch on what my colleague has said, that a new section has also been added to the Principal Act to prohibit a councillor who is removed from office by the MEC in terms of the court from standing as a candidate in election of a municipal council for a period of 2 years from the date of which such person was removed from office. This intervention will abate a situation whereby the Code of Conduct is rendered ineffective by councillors becoming members of council immediately after removal by the MEC. I think my colleague Granville elaborated on this matter earlier on, that why was that is the case and why there's this inclusion now into the Amendment Act that is going to come into effect on the 1st of November. I must say that in conclusion, although not a panacea, it can be pronounced confidently that these amendments are a game changer in as far as addressing governance and accountability challenges in municipalities post the 2021 local government elections. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Siyanda Leslie. It's interesting to note how positive you are on the amendments, and it creates a sense of, I would say, positivity within the space that we're in now, going forth, There's a lot of predictions of coalitions that are coming with the local government elections and what's going to happen post the elections, the implications on governance, and the aspirations that we have in terms of democratic principles. And so taking the conversation further from what you are saying with regards to governance, I would now like to hand over to Ms. Jenica Bucas, who is currently a doctoral student candidate at the Dullah Omar Institute. And her specific focus for today's discussion is on how governance has been affected in coalition-led municipalities and the challenges with coalitions and what's needed to fix them. And this is quite pertinent given the time that we're in. And just a bit of Jenica's background. She completed a LLB degree in 2017. She became associate with the Dullah Omar Institute in 2018 when she enrolled for the Law, State and Multi-Level Government LLM course. During this time, she also interned at Stellenbosch Municipality, where she gained hands-on experience of the procedures and processes of local government. And the following year, she graduated with her LLM degree. So it's very interesting to have a youth amongst us now that's going to be presenting to us on what we can anticipate with regards to the coalitions and how to impact democracy, and also where there are problems, what can we do to fix them? Over to you, Jenica.
Hi, can you all see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Jenica. Yes, we can see you. There was just a moment of silence.
Yeah, my laptop froze. Sorry about that. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Shyam. I would just like to share my screen with you. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen? You can see my screen, Shyam.
We're not seeing anything at the moment. Oh, here we go. Perfect. Yeah, we can see it, Jenica.
Okay, sorry, my laptop is really slow. So good day, everyone. Thanks for providing me with the opportunity to engage with you on the discussion about coalition governments in municipalities. Coalitions is certainly the topic that is on everyone's lips at the moment, and I'm happy to make a contribution towards that debate today. Like Shyam said, the topic that I will be discussing today looks at how governance has been affected in coalition-led municipalities, the challenges with coalitions, and what's needed to fix them. Okay, so as an introduction, as Prof. De Visser and Mr. Abrams stated earlier, coalitions have been around since the first general elections of the year 2000s. Hung councils recurred in every subsequent general elections, with the 2016 local elections also producing hung councils in 4 of the major city councils, namely the City of Johannesburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, Ekurhuleni, and the City of Tshwane. And they are also likely to arise again in the upcoming elections. Despite having several good characteristics, such as enhancing accountability and oversight in municipalities by having, as the Visser states, more eyes on the till, discussions around coalition governments have generally been centered around what makes them bad and undesirable in municipalities. And there is merit to this view. In practice, many coalitions in municipalities have been unstable and often terminates before the 5-year council term. So in terms of governance, several coalitions, including those of the Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Municipality, the City of Tshwane, Kanaland, Abakulisi, and Beto Municipality were unstable. Stalemates in the council is a regular feature of coalition-led municipalities where constant infighting and walkouts have prevented the council from continuing business as usual. And in these circumstances, the council couldn't adopt their budget or make key appointments, for instance. And then service delivery also becomes affected because the administration can't spend its budget, and this further contributes to service delivery backlogs in these municipalities. In practice, though, a vast majority of municipalities are unstable and they are struggling to deliver services. Many municipalities are at risk of becoming dysfunctional, and 26 of them are already under provincial administration. And the table here shows that of the 26 municipalities that are currently under administration, provincial administration, only 4 of those municipalities are coalition-led municipalities, and the rest are governed by single-party majorities. So the data here suggests that the problem of instability in municipal councils is not unique to coalition governments. Arguments that coalitions are significantly worse than single-party governments therefore seem misplaced. It also means that solving the issue of instability in coalitions requires that we look beyond the coalition to establish what is needed to address the problem of unstable governance in councils more generally. But that is not to say that coalitions are perfect. There are several challenges that confront coalitions in municipalities. And these relate to the political environment, party systems, the lack of or limited experience with coalitions, and the organization of the coalition. So coalitions are shaped by its context, and these 4 factors influences coalition, and it in turn gives rise to the challenges of coalitions in practice. So in terms of the political environment, coalition governments require stability to govern effectively. But in several cases, coalitions cannot be insulated from politics that transcends the coalition. Instability in councils is then often caused by external influences that come from opposition parties in the council. So there is a trend in practice in coalition-led municipalities where the coalition is often destabilized by the opposition parties that continuously bring motions of no confidence against the speaker and mayor of the coalition in an attempt to unseat these members of the coalition and thereby constitute a new government. And then the South African political landscape is also informed by patronage politics and rent-seeking behavior among political parties. And this also finds expression in the context of coalitions as coalitions coalition formation in practice is largely based on patronage and rent-seeking. But I want to qualify this by saying that rent-seeking behavior in coalitions is not necessarily unethical. The reality is that politicians participate in politics for the common good, but also for many, it is a source of employment. And unemployment in South Africa is at a record high. So joining politics is a means of escaping the effects of unemployment. But these 2 elements are not necessarily mutually exclusive. In the context of coalition formation, discussions around the political office distribution is therefore a minimum condition that must feature in the coalition talks. However, rent-seeking behavior can become bad if it's tainted with corruption and if it's a person's sole objective for entering into a coalition. And this is often the case with coalitions, and it makes the coalition unstable because it is easy for party members to then be bought out if presented with a better offer by another party. In terms of party systems, political party systems are structured in a way that makes its senior leaders important in practice. So many party constitutions require councillors to vote in accordance with the instructions that they receive from the top. And this means that the personalities of party leaders in a coalition situation becomes important. If relationships between them sour, as it did in the case of Nelson Mandela Bay, between the UDM and the DA, then it is likely that the coalition government will also suffer. In terms of limited experience with coalitions, so while political parties with national status like the DA, EFF, the Forward Front Plus, for example, have acquired some experience with coalitions over the years, smaller parties are often new to the game of coalitions, and their lack of experience in coalitions makes them vulnerable to be persuaded into accepting political deals that aims to provide larger parties with more benefits than the smaller parties. And of course, there's nothing wrong with this, but it leaves smaller parties with little incentive to cooperate in the coalitions, and this makes coalitions unsustainable. And in terms of the organization of the coalition, ideally, coalitions ought to be organized in a way that ensures that the coalition will hold from one general election to the next. However, the Constitution and legislation doesn't provide any direction on the structure that the coalitions ought to assume, or the factors that they ought to consider when these coalitions are being put together. This, together with parties' limited experience with coalition politics, suggests that political parties have to construct coalition agreements in the context of uncertainty. So in practice, this often translates to coalitions that are poorly structured and managed, which adversely impacts on its stability and duration. So what is needed to fix coalitions? A main determinant for stable coalition governments is through party discipline that can encourage cooperation in the coalition. So political parties have constitutions that contains the rules for behavior, procedures for decision-making and conflict resolution to promote party discipline in their respective political parties. And failure to abide by the terms of their constitutions is often responded to by removing the councillor in the council or through disciplining him or her in their internal structures. But in coalitions, a political instrument that performs this function is the coalition agreement. However, in practice, the problem is that coalition agreements are vague and they lack persuasive value to enforce the coalition. So then the question then is, how can coalition agreements serve its purpose in practice? So my research suggests that the process that precedes the coalition agreement, namely the coalition formation or the bargaining phase, requires that certain rules that coalition parties ought to follow when the coalitions are negotiated be in place. And the purpose of these rules should be aimed at constraining the decision-making by setting the confines within which the coalition politics must take place. So by adhering to the rules, the product would then be a negotiated settlement, namely the coalition agreement, that accommodates the interests and preferences of each political party, and which also provides incentives for the parties to cooperate in the long run. So therefore, it may be necessary for a framework to be devised that can serve as a guide to coalition parties in structuring the coalition and determining the content of the coalition agreement. So the framework may, for instance, provide guidance on the following. So it may provide guidance on who must negotiate the bargaining process, who are the negotiators, what is the procedure for coalition bargaining, how should political offices be distributed in the coalition, how many seats in the executive should each coalition partner be entitled to, how should the coalition make decisions, how will disputes be resolved in the coalition, how will accountability and oversight be exercised in the coalition, what factors should they consider when the coalition program is devised, should a coalition agreement be public, and if so, when should the coalition agreement be published? And apart from this, it is also necessary to consider how external influences that destabilizes the coalition in practice can be restricted. So this may be done by considering whether institutional reform in the municipality may be necessary. And perhaps one of the most important factors that parties should consider when they enter coalitions is the ideological proximity with the coalition partners. And while most argue that ideology doesn't matter at the local level, I maintain that it does. While I agree that at the local level, it is about service delivery, it must also be noted that political parties operate within a multi-level government context, and ideology does indeed matter at the national level. So conflicts emanating from ideological differences at the national level may then tumble down to and influence coalition politics at the local level, as it did between the DA and the EFF in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Municipality. So political parties like the Forward Front Plus, the EFF, and the DA, during the current campaigning period, they all advocated that they will not be entering into coalitions with political parties that don't support their policy commitments. So some parties like the Forward Front Plus and the EFF even expressly mentioned each other as parties with whom they will not be entering into a coalition with the DA, seemingly wanting to avoid a coalition situation altogether. But this suggests that parties have learned a valuable lesson over the last council term, which is that ideology proximity does indeed matter for local government. And then finally, the dominance of patronage politics in South Africa is a problem. If we are to move away from patronage politics, it is necessary for parties to become policy orientated. Now, Mr. Moniani stated earlier that one of the core pillars for building better communities requires the delivery of quality services. And to achieve this, policy would be important. So local government is responsible for promoting socioeconomic development in communities, and how they achieve this obligation ought to be informed by the ideologies and subsequent policy programs of each political party. So for example, is there another way municipal health services can be achieved in practice? What smarter options are available? Municipalities must also promote a safe and healthy environment. So how can services at the local level be improved to combat the issue of climate change? What greener policy initiatives can be undertaken to address climate change? This can be achieved through policy changes, and municipalities have bylaw making functions, which leaves room for the adoption of new policies that are associated with new ideologies and new concepts of services and service delivery. So by developing a framework that makes it mandatory to include policy programs of political parties will also then be forced to reform and consider their policy stances on various socioeconomic issues. And this in turn has the benefit of influencing an innovation culture, which is desperately needed in local government. I'll leave you with this. Here I have a picture of what is intended with the framework. Essentially, what needs to happen is that the framework must be devised in such a manner that each political party will derive the maximum benefit that they can derive if they were in any coalition situation. So the position then is that if one party decides to defect from the coalition, it would not only serve as a disadvantage for the coalition, but the party will essentially be shooting himself in the foot as well. So that is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenica, and that is a whole lot from you. Riveting feedback and insights into your studies. I particularly like the fact that you speak about the political discipline that is key in the coalitions, as well as the formation of coalition agreements that would almost concretize where the synergies are in terms of policies and the political ideologies of the political parties going forward, which I find interesting, but I also do believe that there would be contestation in this regard. And also what is interesting is that you say that the policies with regards to services that the agreements should also take that into account. So you've left us with a lot of thinking to do. And on that note, I'm going to actually hand over to my colleague who's going to facilitate the next question and answer session. If I can just formally introduce him, he's Mr. Coogan Pillay, an independent project management consultant with expertise in the area of governance and development, strategy formulation, as well as implementation, a background in social justice and human rights. Furthermore, Mr. Coogan, Mr. Pillay is reading his PhD towards governance in sustainability. And lastly, just positions that he's held. He was the former project manager of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, the presidency and the SIU, as well as serving as an advisory board member for the former public protector. So Coogan, I hand over to you to facilitate the question and answer sessions. There were quite a few questions that came through in the chat box. So let the discussion begin. Thanks.
Thanks, Shaham. As you all know, Shaham came in late. So for those of you who don't know her, she's presently the South African Research Chair in Multi-Level Government Law and Development, and previously an admitted attorney with a master's in law at the University of Western Cape and a doctorate in law from the Dullah Omar Institute. And she, her work area covers policy and legal drafting. So with that in mind,
let me just correct you, please. I'm dying. I'm not the chair. I'm a postdoc fellow for the chair. All right.
Thanks for correcting that. In case we have anyone from the media in the audience. So so thanks to the panelists, and we've had some questions from the esteemed audience, and I think just to help with some dialogue, if you don't mind, I'm going to introduce them and bring them into the discussion. I think essentially, Mr. Granville Abraham spoke about the legal framework. Mr. Thabo Manyoni spoke about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, as well as the impact of leadership. And Mr. Sianda spoke about the governance and accountability framework. And lastly, Ms. Jenica spoke about the role of coalitions. So if you don't mind, the first two questions was from Mr. Pops Rampasad and Mr. Purushottam Reddy during Mr. Granville's presentation. So Pops, is it okay if I invite you to speak in the forum and to raise the question? Thanks, Omri.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. That will be fine. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much. I am Pops Rampasad. I'm the chair of the Active Citizens Movement in Durban. My question relates to the candidates that are contesting a number of wards within a municipal boundary. How is that possible? You know, because I think they're weakening the kind of democracy that we want. How come they allowed to do that, whereas the citizens are only allowed to vote in the ward in which they reside or have a business interest? Thank you very much for that.
Thanks a lot, Pops. You want to answer the question in the meantime, Mr. Abrams?
No, thanks a lot for the question, Mr. Rampasad. That is definitely one of the issues that we considered when we were looking at proposing amendments. It's not that the candidate is allowed, is this that, and it may sound a bit playing around with words, he is not prevented from doing it at the moment. The qualifying criteria or the constitutional criteria for a candidate or for somebody to be a member of council is simply that he must be on the eligible to vote for that municipality. So by that, he's obviously eligible. We've, I think we may, as it stands currently, we may have a challenge. It may not pass constitutional muster if you want to limit that. But what I can, however, say to you is that there's some parties that obviously employ this religiously. And I think at this stage in time, it's the bigger parties who is within the current currently constituting municipalities form the bulk thereof. So within the African National Congress, there is a requirement that in order to be nominated, you must be in that ward, and they have branches and nominating committees set up like that. The same with the, similarly with the EFF, and then also I think to a certain extent also with the DA. For the newer or smaller parties, you'll find that they may not even have sufficient candidates to field, specifically in the metro. So you'll find that there somebody would put up his name for each and every ward. I think a lot also has to do with the electoral system, because in order to qualify for a PR seat, which is probably what most of them set their sights on, you need to bring into account both the PR votes as well as the ward seats, the ward votes at least, and together determine your quota, which at the end of the day determines your overall seats. Now, your newer parties, their biggest hope is probably to get a PR seat, and therefore they're now contesting all of those elections. So the election or the ballots are not really separate for each and every election, other than just the ward being for the ward. But to determine proportionality, both the ward and the PR are taken into account. It is something of my issue with that, Jose, is that I think at the end of the day, it encourages frivolity to see a party, one person, being on all of the ballots. For, let's say, for example, if you're looking at Johannesburg in 100 and odd wards, surely the person can't win all of the wards, so he's just on the ballot just to get the votes. But in the final analysis, constitutionally, there's nothing prohibiting him.
Thank you for that, Pops and Granville. The next, I'll come back to Pashotum and Langston just now, but if I can give Omri a chance. Omri, if you can introduce yourself and address the question and who you want the question answered. Over to you, Omri.
Yes, thank you very much, Comrade Kruger. Sorry to say that I don't know what to, maybe, yeah, a bit formal. Sorry for that. I've got a comment and a question. My comment, first of all, is that I think this to do with the elections of the mayors. I believe that the mayors are employed by the citizens of the town or the city. And in my mind, the citizens should be directly electing the mayors rather than the parties appointing the mayors or deploying the mayors. And I think that is where the key problem comes from, of accountability. And that's why we don't have this accountability, because the people who pay the salaries of the mayors are actually not the employers of these mayors, but the mayors are employed by their parties. And that's where I think the flaw is. And this is my view, that we should change that law so that mayors can be directly elected by the citizens. Now, the question I would wish to ask, that I forgot that who spoke about Menco and accounts. Sorry for that, for forgetting the name. I want to know, why can't we have lifestyle audit as in the legislation, or so for all this public officials who are supposed to undergo lifestyle audit before they assume office? Maybe if we have such a law, it will then minimize the number of crooks that actually end up in the office. But thank you very much for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Comrade Omri. I'm not sure who would take the question, whether it would be Mr. Sianda and Keshley or Mr. Thabo Manyoni. Can I invite the panelists to come forward and respond to Mr. Omri Mokala's question? Sianda or?
Okay, so if I can come in with that one. Let me start by the issue of electing the mayors directly. I think it's a suggestion, and I know it has been debated. In fact, not only on the sphere of government, of local government, but this has been a debate about all spheres of government. Why shouldn't that have the system whereby we do those elections directly? But the comment that is being raised is actually something that is in the domain of debate. But I want to comment about lifestyle audit and about why shouldn't we have that in the legislation. You know, partly in one way or another, the issue of the lifestyle audit of municipal officials is covered in the Code of Conduct for municipal officials. So the Systems Act has a Code of Conduct for municipal officials, so as the Structures Act has got a Code of Conduct for councillors. In the Code of Conduct for officials, there are also declarations they have to make about the interest, the shares, and whatever they have, which actually in one way or another is meant to cross-check whether what they have, is it been declared and is it not really going to conflict with them in terms of what in their responsibilities. So the Code of Conduct for officials in one way or another addresses the lifestyle of an official, because each and every year they have to declare all those things, the share they have in companies, the interest they have, and all sorts of those things. Thanks.
Thanks, Sianda. The other question was from Mr. Purushottam Reddy. Purushottam, could you quickly introduce yourself? And the question you raised was about performance, making reference to Professor Jaap's earlier statement. Over to you, Purushottam. Purushottam, are you still around? Okay, should we go to the next question, which was from Lorenzo Johnston. Lorenzo, would you like to come in and raise your question? I think it's with Mr. Granville Abrams. Lorenzo? All right, it seems like some of us are leaving because of the weather. The other question was from Professor Jaap, Professor, to Mr. Granville on citizens. Jaap, on councillor vacancies. Jaap, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Gugan. No, it's just a question for Granville. Sorry, Granville, you're a bit in the hot seat, but hopefully you can maybe just shed some light on the thinking behind, and I know we've spoken about this before back in the day, and when I saw the Structures Amendment Bill, I thought it would be addressed, but it wasn't, and maybe there's a very good reason for it. But it is this question of why do we expect the municipal manager to declare the vacancy? Because it's sort of put out as a simple administrative issue, but very often it is not. It's a very politically complex and legally complex decision, where a party would come to the MM and saying, listen, we have expelled Councillor so-and-so, so please declare the vacancy. But Councillor so-and-so also comes to the MM and says, no, don't you dare declare a vacancy. I'm not expelled because I'm challenging the decision. I'm going to court. I don't agree. There are party procedures busy with dealing with this. So it becomes a whole complicated story for the MM to then be drawn into that. Really a place where he or she doesn't want to be, because he or she is now asked to basically determine the fate of his or her employer, of his or her principal, and saying, you are no longer a councillor. And you know, I'm sure you're familiar with the case of Johan Metler, MM in Nelson Mandela Bay, inside a council meeting with about 120 councillors breathing down his neck and screaming at him. He had to decide whether or not there was a vacancy. He decided a particular way. That went to court, and 2 days, I think a full day of high court proceedings with 3 silks and a high court judge, they came to another conclusion, and that prompted his suspension. And you know, a year and a half he was suspended. So he was dragged into a political battle because he had to decide on declaring a vacancy, and it's really not a place where an MM wants to be. So the question is, why is it that we ask the MM to do that? Why is it not the IEC, who has all the party constitutions on file and who has the independence and can, in my view, but maybe I see it incorrectly, make that call authoritatively and say, yes or no, there is a vacancy? That's my question. Thanks, Coogan. Thanks, Granville.
Thanks, Professor Yap. Granville, over to you.
Thanks a lot for the question, Professor De Visser. Yeah, it is tough, but I would, before we get to the politics, I would think that it is a normal day's business for municipal managers to have to make tough decisions, deal with litigation, etc., as the CEO for a municipality. So from that aspect, first of all, I don't think there's anything different. The dynamics of the pressure of your, if I could call it, your board of directors, that you have to issue a notice for against what they believe in, that is probably the difficult one. And I've actually seen cases that where you've had a municipal manager suspended, maybe because he didn't want to declare vacancy, and in his absence, an acting municipal manager was appointed to carry out the wills and the wishes of the political heads there, and vice versa as well, whether it was not to declare one as well. I don't know, but I think that currently, as legislation stands, and as far as our constitutional mandate is concerned, I think that if there was a call for us to do that, we'd be overstepping our mandate, because our mandate is to administer the elections, and we have no other defined role in local government. So that may be a bit of a limitation in terms of doing that. But it's the little bit, and I don't know if it really helps, the little bit of insurance that we have sort of built in now is to say that the municipal manager can step in. You know, so if not the municipal manager, my apologies, the MEC. So if the municipal manager is under pressure, and if he fails to inform the IEC, then the MEC can do that. I don't know to what extent that is going to play itself out, but at least now we'll be dealing with 11 personalities or 11 political heads, and not your 257 MMs who are influenced by, or maybe influenced by, the mayor or the speaker, etc. But currently, I think maybe just a straightforward answer, I don't think that the IEC is empowered, you know, in terms of its mandate, to go in and usurp the authority to decide whether a councillor is no longer. Our role as it stands is just to declare, to manage the election of such a councillor. Thanks, Coogan.
Thanks, Granville. Professor De Visser, it seems like that's a PhD question for a very avid candidate. Next question, last question was from Vessel on voter eligibility. Vessel, are you in?
Yes, I'm still here.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Vessel.
my question.
Go for it, Vessel.
Thank you. Yes, my question goes back to voter eligibility and the issue of residence. If you go back 25 years and you look at the local government elections, 1995, 1996, the interesting thing is that foreign nationals could vote in those municipal elections because they were resident in the municipality. So residence seems to me to be a very crucial aspect of elections in local government elections. We know, of course, that foreigners were disenfranchised subsequently, and that the Electoral Commission lost focus on the importance of ordinary residents, registering people without checking their addresses and where they're not ordinary residents, and we had some constitutional court cases. So my question is, where do we stand on this issue currently for this election? Have all those issues been sorted out? And if we're taking residents seriously, should we not go back to where we were 25 years ago and extend that principle to allow permanent residents who are not citizens to vote as well? Thank you.
Thanks, Vessel. Over to you, Graham. Granville.
Thanks, Coogan. Vessel, maybe just a correction. The Municipal Electoral Act came into being in 1996. So perhaps you're referring to prior to 1996. And maybe even in 1994, when we did not have a voters' roll. The right to vote is determined in terms of the Constitution. And first and foremost, you need to be a South African citizen. So that takes away all your non-citizens. So it's a constitutional matter. And then secondly, in terms of the national legislation, you are only allowed to vote, you're only allowed to be on one segment. Doesn't matter how many properties you own in how many different municipalities, and you're only allowed to be on one segment. So you would only be allowed to vote in one of those elections and not all of them. So that is as it stands. It's a constitutional requirement, and the national legislation also just provides for that further. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Abrahams. It seems like most of the questions were aimed at Mr. Granville Abrahams and Mr. Sianda. So it seems like Thabo, yourself, and Jenica, it seemed like the solutions you've discussed with us is for implementation for Professor De Visser and our team to take forward. With that in mind, we come to the end. If there's no more questions from any of the guests, I'd like to now call upon Professor Nico Steytler to make some closing remarks. Over to you, Prof. Steytler.
Thank you very much. It's been a long afternoon, and let me try to be very brief. I think this local government election is probably the most important part, except for the 2001, because never in our history is the picture of local government looking so bleak as it is now, in terms of bankruptcy, in terms of mismanagement, in terms of corruption. And is the deep quest to see, well, can things be done? What can be done? People are resorting to courts for the courts to help. They've asked the court to help us with the Eskom's threat to cut electricity. And the court says, well, these are such big problems. It's not for courts to do so. The courts do not simply have the skills to save local government. In the end, it is the voters, it's the citizens. And it's only they that can really restore integrity to local government, where local government is now often perceived as simply a place for rent seekers, it's for positions, it's for power. And so we invest then so much in our democracy that some of our citizens will say, we deserve better, we're going to ensure that a better set of councillors get elected. And central to this endeavor stands the IEC. And it's one of the beacons in South Africa of a well-functioning institution with the highest of integrity, where there is no questions after an election about that there was any cheating, any rigging. Because if in fact your election results are not accepted, you create greater instability, as we've seen in many countries elsewhere in Africa. So I would say the IEC has the tradition, it has the capacity, it has the knowledge to deal with ever-changing circumstances. And as I think Granville very clearly said was, they did it under extreme circumstances, but it didn't faze them, they produced it. So I'm really fortified and confident that they deliver another great election. But as Graham also then said, they are not there for elections. They are now have to wrap up the mess after elections. And that was a very sobering thought about the issues that emerge once the candidates have been elected, councillors being appointed. And often this mess comes from bad politics, from the search for positions, changing candidates, inability to reach agreements, coalition agreements, inability to stick to coalition agreements. All these then pushes and ask for the IEC again to intervene. And so, as Jessica Beukes is telling us, the need for coalitions is going to be there. It's a reality of our political life. But how can we ensure that it is stable? Because in instability, it goes about who is in, who is the power. It doesn't go about service delivery. So the real quest is then, how do you create the political culture where there is stability in coalitions, that agreements are written down, are made public, are seen by voters and say, well, we understand how it works and why there should be, the party should stick to these coalition agreements. Now, that's the first, probably the whole of November, we're going to be busy with that. But as Mr. Thabo Manyoni said, there is a task. It's not a new task. It is a task that imposed by the Constitution of what needs to be done. The right to basic services, not a discretion or a handout, but the right to basic services that all residents have. And that is key, that is performed. And as Mrs. Yanda Nketli so pointedly say, in terms of the legislation that COGTA has now affected, was, can the elected councils become more accountable? Could there be more eyes on the till and less fingers in the till? And the role of the MPAC, the Municipal Public Accounts Committees, hopefully can play a critical role. So it's really a watershed for me that this coming election should be different from the past, that the citizens may in fact say, yes, we need to take control over our councils. And let me then end with a few things about the guidelines on voting in the local government elections. This is an old project of the Dullah Omar Institute. Way back in 2000, we produced one. And the aim here is that citizens can understand what the system is about, the electoral system. It's one thing to have the IEC whose integrity is not doubted, whose results are not doubted. But it's a complementary system is where people understands how the system works, how registration take place, how candidates lists are composed, how elections are made, why the budget, why the different ballot papers. And so what we try to do with this manual or this guide is to spread it as far as we can. And I think everyone here should be hopefully tweet and be sent a electric copy so that you can again retweet it and send it off to as wide as possible. Because if people understand and see what happens, they trust the IEC, they are happy, but also they can keep the IEC on its toes. And Gran will tell me, will certainly agree that there always should be watchers also of the IEC. Let me just then conclude by saying a few words of thanks for this event. First and foremost, the two engines behind this webinar, Shaham Johnson and Coogan Pillay, for pulling this together at a very short time. And it was only possible with the quickness and speed with which our partners at the Swiss Embassy could come to the party. And a great thank you to Fanny Sharmay and Larissa Schneider, who was exemplary in the way that they could make quick decisions and make sure that the manual or the guides and this webinar could come off. Thank you very much. But the manual or the guidelines is only as good as the status that it has. It is, of course, our own integrity in writing it is important, but then also the support that we received from COCTA and from the IEC. They went through it in detail and said, yes, your formulas work, your examples work, you are right, and that we are willing to put our name to it. So thank you for both the COCTA and IEC for this. And the last word of thanks must go to Jaap de Visser, who was the principal writer of the guide. He loves it. He was a bit was dismayed when he did all the cases regarding the difficulties of managing a council, getting elected, but hopefully this is, we will see better results coming now. So the point of the exercise was to make available to the public an accessible guide, easy readable, easily understood, but accurate, and that we can look forward to a citizenry that are better informed, know what they do, also political parties, candidates, the IEC, everyone who's involved in the coming election, that they may benefit from it. So thank you, everyone, and keep well. And vote on next Monday. Thanks.
Thanks, Prof. Steytler, for those closing remarks. And as you would have heard, Prof. Steytler saying the guide is as good as it being implemented. So in that regard, colleagues, the recordings will be sent to those who attended and who have asked for it. And then the guide you'll be able to pick up on the Dullah Omar website. With that, thanks Prof. Steytler and all of you who have attended and the panelists. And the session is now officially closed. Thank you all. Bye-bye.